Hello everyone, I'm Professor Geek, welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to part 2 of my Spider-Man series leading up to the release of Spider-Man Homecoming. In part 1, which you can find by clicking in the top right hand corner, we took a more academic approach and looked at Spider-Man's embodiment of the trickster archetype. In this video, I'm joined by my friend and fellow YouTuber Nightwolf Plays to discuss Spider-Man's long representations in animation. So without further ado, let's switch to that conversation.
So I'm excited to have my guest here, Nightwolf. Been a friend of the channel for a while, and going back and forth on each other's channels, commenting and admiring each other's work, but good to finally have you here in a collaboration video.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Well, it isn't my first time. I did one for your channel last year.
Yes, but this is the only one. This is the first time you and I have been on it together, chatting.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so
that's not my first time on the channel.
That's exactly, yeah. First collab. I don't know how you define collab, but yeah, whatever. Still new to all this YouTube stuff. But yeah, so I wanted to talk. I know, yeah. Spider-Man is a character near and dear to your heart. I know you talk about him quite a bit on your channel, and
boy, yes,
yeah, and that's cool and that's great. I mean, somebody that really means a lot to you, and that's perfect for this kind of segment. And I had asked you about were there any of the major the films that you wanted to talk about, and you said, well, how about animation? And that's obviously a great idea. I mean, Spider-Man, I honestly think maybe rivaled only to Superman with having as much of a presence in our culture through animation as well, like from the beginning. I mean, way back in the 60s, I mean, he's just always had a series going or something, even long before he came to film. So he had a lot of them, and I figured you and I would talk about a couple in particular, but just to mention, of course, I think the first one was the 60s, and that's the one where we have all the memes from now, right? All the funny memes, if you search like Spider-Man meme.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's where they all came from. I remember that the 60s animation was basically ripped straight from the comic books, and they just moved the mouths a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, that low budget animation.
I've watched a couple episodes or things here and there years and years ago, so it's like, oh yeah, I know that. That was very cheap.
Yeah.
In the animation department, but still, it was funny.
Yeah, it was fun. Gave us a lot of memes nonetheless. A lot of people cite, and I know this isn't one of the series that you and I are going to talk about in more depth, but a lot of people cite the 90s, the John Semper series, as being like one of the best or their favorites usually. Did you have any interest in that or enjoy that at all?
Actually, yes, because, all right, is it okay if I kind of go a little bit into when I was first introduced to the character?
Yeah.
When I was I think I was about maybe 6 or 7 years old, and my mom and my dad and my brother, they were all going to a local chain store here. It's called the Fred Meyer's. Other places, they have other names for it. But they have these anniversary things, and they have a bunch of people in costumes and big sales. And me and my brother, we were walking down one of the aisles, and literally, this is how I remember it. It was so vivid that this guy jumped off of one of the shelves or something. He was hiding somewhere, jumped out, and landed. And it's like, hello, I'm Spider-Man. And I'm like,
nice.
It startled me and my brother, but we were like, oh, that's so cool. And, and we got signed autographs from Spider-Man. And
that's awesome.
No, I didn't get to keep I lost it years and years later, unfortunately, because I didn't take care of anything as a child.
Yeah.
But, and then in the 90s, like you mentioned, everyone loves the 90s Spider-Man series. I did too, because that was one of my, before Spectacular, which is what we're going to get into,
mm-hmm.
I loved the 90s one, because that's what I grew up with. That's where I learned so much about the character and whatnot. And they did such a wonderful job encapsulating a lot of the things that make Spider-Man really a unique character and really fun character. Of course, the one thing I think that that I had a major problem with the animation style was that Peter was super buff. He was very, he looked like a lot of the 90s X-Men characters. They were super buff. He wasn't lanky or tiny. He was about the same size as a Cyclops, and I was like, And then I'd pick up my first comic book in the 90s, and Spider-Man looked nothing like it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
Why did that happen?
All the characters were on steroids in that 90s era on TV and stuff, yeah.
But I love that show so much. A lot of my favorite villains came from watching that show. I loved the Venom story arcs. I loved the Hobgoblin story arcs. The Green Goblin stuff was pretty good too. And like the first few episodes, like with the Chameleon and other assorted characters, Kraven the Hunter, all that stuff. I loved it so much growing up.
Well, I'll just briefly mention mine because it comes a little bit before Spectacular Spider-Man continuity there, but then I want you to delve in and talk to us about that. So I think I've enjoyed a lot of different incarnations of Spider-Man in animation, but as a child, I grew up watching Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends on the cartoons on Saturday mornings. And now part of it I realize now is because still to this day I have a absolute total crush on Firestar, but I also appreciated how that was able to kind of play with the continuity of the character. I mean, in no other incarnation does he go buddy off with Firestar. I mean, Firestar was a new character anyway, but a couple of former X-Men and do his own thing. But it was able to do that, but yet not really break out of the character too much. And Stan Lee even came on eventually and was doing intros and stuff to the show. And
I remember
only
those.
2 seasons, but it was very much still in character, having some fun, stretching out continuity otherwise. So I thought that was fun. But that kind of brings me to Spectacular Spider-Man, because by the time that show rolled around, he'd been in so many different incarnations thus far. So what about Spectacular Spider-Man was a special approach for you?
For me personally, I liked it was... I like watching the behind-the-scenes stuff particularly. I watched it after watching through the entire series again. And Greg Weisman and the creative staff there, they wanted to make something that was contemporary and modern, but still held true to the original source material. And that really got my attention. And even when I first watched it like on TV and whatnot, I was like, this is very close to what I know about the comic books and the history there. I'm like, this is almost like a beat-for-beat representation of the comic book with, creative liberties done with the art style and the animation. But aside from that, it's like this felt like Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. Just like almost entirely like straight from a comic book, just with a very simple and very fluid animation style. Spider-Man was wonderful. The Peter Parker stuff was great. All the character development that happened, even for minor characters, was done so well. And it's like, this feels organic. It feels natural. This feels like what Spider-Man in an animated film setting or even in a film setting should be. Mm-hmm. And I liked how they handled a lot of the particular ways that they handled certain story arcs and whatnot. And I loved actually that the very first episode was when he fights the Vulture and the Enforcers. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, that's almost like directly from the comic books, because one of his first fights was with the Kingpin's Enforcers, with Montana, Ox, and Fancy Dan. And it was like, that's because you didn't get to see them in the 90s version, or I don't even know if they may have been in the old 60s version, but in almost every other iteration, you never see the Enforcers ever. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's like, well, those guys are real old school style villains because they're just normal guys for the most part. They're just highly skilled criminals. And you get to see guys like Hammerhead, and there were just nods to certain characters that you don't get to visit or see in the show or in an animated feature, because everyone's like going to focus on things like Venom, Green Goblin, Electro, Dr. Octopus. They're going to focus on the big bads. A lot of them don't add like little tinier characters or smaller villains. I mean, the 90s,
some of the nuanced ones.
Yeah, the 90s included like the Kingpin and a few other like minor note villains like the Spot and a few other more odder characters, but for the most part, you wouldn't get to see somebody like something that old school that pretty much nobody gets to know about.
Yeah.
I mean, I even like the fact that Montana got to be the Shocker instead, which actually made it even more fun to listen to the voice actor doing his southern accent. It was actually kind of really fun to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. So the setting, I think it grounded it more in Spider-Man as a high school student, right? Yeah. I mean, he was that in parts of the 90s, but it felt a little more real.
The 90s focused on his college years, actually.
He was
in the college.
That's right. Yeah. Point. Okay. And so, I think part of this might be, you mentioned Greg Weisman, some of the people behind it. Weisman has done some of the most wonderful teen-centered superhero animation. Of course, now he's one of the minds behind a lot of the TV shows or whatever, but I mean, he went on to do Young Justice. He's done other stuff like that. So I mean, he really seems to have a good grasp on how to do a group of friends dealing with each other. And you mentioned some of the other characters.
Yeah, I think that with Greg, he has a really great way of handling the source material that he's given. Because with Young Justice, I was like, this is obviously tailored for a younger audience, just like the Spectacular Spider-Man, but even adults can enjoy it. And those are the types of animations I love the most, is that, a kid's going to love this, for the bright colors and the fun action and stuff. But an adult like myself or others are going to enjoy it because of how well put together it is. The stories are more deep and involved than just a simple, hey, let's go fight the bad guy of the week and then move on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
you mentioned.
Go ahead.
You mentioned. Oh no, I just wanted to. You mentioned some of the voice act stuff like that, and some of the lower, I guess, lesser known actors, even in Peter Parker's universe. Like, I know Gwen Stacy had shown up a couple of times here and there before, but it seems like this was her first series to really shine.
Yeah.
Above MJ, right?
Yeah, because in the '90s it was MJ. I think that she wasn't in Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, as far as I remember. In the 60s, I don't know. I think that they focused mainly on Betty Brant because it was like the earliest forms of the comics, and Gwen wasn't a major player until a few years later, I think. But this was, I think, the first time that she was ever given any major spotlight aside from, the movies. But and I really appreciated that because I kind of liked her progression as a character. Just on her own, is she's just Peter's friend, and then she's a lot more than that. And her progression to being the Gwen that everybody knows from the comic books and whatnot was really good.
Yeah. And I think Lacey Chabert, I can never know if I'm pronouncing her last name right, but she's done a lot of great stuff. Lacey Chabert was the voice actress for Gwen Stacy. Were there any other voice actor performances that stuck out to you on the show?
Josh Keaton, who did Spider-Man. I love him as Spider-Man. I think he's probably one of my favorites aside from, the 90s Spider-Man and Neil Patrick Harris as Spider-Man. He had such a fun energy and knew how to be like, serious when needed. He had that range of, here's the goofy, funny Spider-Man and here's the more down-to-earth, serious Peter Parker stuff that everybody relates to the most, and he really nailed it in all of those different aspects for Spider-Man. Just for Spider-Man itself was really great. I loved, what was it? Steve Bloom did at least one voice. He was the Green Goblin, and I love that because that was actually a very, very well done Green Goblin. It reminded me not so much of the Green Goblin from the 90s, but it kind of reminded me a little bit more of the Hobgoblin from the 90s show.
Yeah.
Because the Hobgoblin from the 90s show was like a big trickster, and he had like some of the best lines in that show. He did all the fun stuff like, I'm such a bad hacker. Bad. He had so many fun lines like, I want this face to be the last thing my enemy sees, and this Green Goblin reminded me a lot of that performance. And Steve Bloom's just a fantastic voice actor, and the fact that he can pull off a crazy maniacal voice like that was very impressive.
Yeah. So how many seasons did Spectacular Spider-Man run?
2. Just two seasons, sadly.
Yeah. I haven't seen the entirety of it yet, but I'd really like to go back and watch a lot of these great animated films. You mentioned Neil Patrick Harris too. He was such a great voice for it, but that series, I think it's such a shame that they did it completely computer animated because it is so dated, the look of it now. You know?
Sadly, it does look very dated now. I mean, I still like watching it. I still have it on DVD. I'll watch it from time to time. Because he nails that whole, comedic Spider-Man stuff really, really well in that. And there were lots of really funny lines and jokes that he pulled off that I'm like, that was clever. That was fun. Thank you for that.
Definitely.
And also, he also got to do one of the video games, too. So
that's right. I forgot about that.
He did Shattered Dimension. He played the Amazing Spider-Man. And then they had, what was it? Spider-Man Noir was done by the 90s voice actor.
The guy who did Eric in Little Mermaid. I can't remember his name right now, but
I forget his name. I know who he is, but I can never remember. And I can't remember who did. They picked actors who had played Spider-Man in the past in some form or another, and I'm just trying to remember who played.
Was Dan Gilvezan in that? He was one of my favorite Spider-Man actors from Amazing Friends and whatnot.
I think. Oh wait,
he's an older guy.
I think he was in it.
Oh great! I need to play that game.
I think he was Spider-Man 2099.
Oh nice. Okay.
He played Miguel, and then I think Josh Keaton might have been one of the voices for Spider-Man 2, but I'm not sure. Oh wait, no, maybe it wasn't him. I think it was the same voice actor they got for the Ultimate Spider-Man video game originally.
Okay.
So
cool. Yeah. So video games. I mean, we do have the new Sony one's going to be coming out soon. Do you have high hopes for that?
I hope it's good. When I knew it was coming out eventually. They announced it last year, and I was like, okay, that's one of the top things that I'm really excited for. Please let that come out soon. And then this year's press conference says, oh, it's not coming out till 2018, and I'm like, no. I wanted it now. I wanted it this year.
I know.
Crap. But it looks interesting, also using a lesser-known villain that even some people don't even care for, using Mr. Negative. But I think that it should be a fun game, although I don't know why they had to tease Miles Morales in the game too, but
yeah.
I'm like, okay, what's that all about? Are we going to have more than one Spider-Man in the game?
I'm sure it'll be tied to DLC somehow.
It'll either be tied to DLC or they're doing a little bait and switch. Some people said that the theory is that they're going to bait and switch, and you're going to spend part of the game as Spider-Man, and then partway through you're going to become Miles. And I'm like, I don't know if I want that. I don't.
Yeah,
I mean, it might be fun, but I don't really know enough about Miles to care about the character.
Yeah.
I only know like surface level, like when Bendis made him and that stuff. And as a Spider-Man, he's fine. It's just not my Spider-Man.
Yeah. He's got a huge following, but just being a Spider-Man fan doesn't automatically make you a Miles Morales fan. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, well, this kind of brings us a nice segue to talk about your channel a little bit, because your channel, you talk a lot about comics and everything, but you've been doing a lot of gaming recently with Injustice and stuff, so how would you pitch your channel to somebody?
Well, basically my channel is whatever I feel like doing at this point. Initially when I started my channel, it was just purely a gameplay channel. I just started by playing at least one imported Japanese game, a Gundam game, and I just played through that, and then over the course of the years, I've always been aware of what's going on with comic books and with movies and stuff, but I never really bothered to talk about it because I didn't have the means to do it for several years. Like when they announced Ultimate Spider-Man's death, when Spider-Man died in issue 700, I didn't have a computer. I didn't have the means to talk about it aside from like watching videos and maybe commenting on videos. So it's like, I really have all these pent-up feelings and frustrations when it comes to comic books. And it's like, and I gotta get them out. So it's like, I might as well pitch them into the channel. And I think that most of my growth as a channel currently is because of the comic book related stuff. It's not because of the game stuff. Although a lot of the people who do watch my channel do watch the game stuff too, which I appreciate, but...
Yeah. No, the game, I mean, both of it's stuff's fun, but hearing you just kind of go off on things is one of the pleasures of your channel.
I think it is.
Tuning into that.
I'm a frustrated individual at times. I'm very passionate about things, and when things don't go well, whether in a video game or in any other format, it doesn't go well. and I go off and...
Well, I will definitely have a link to your channel, obviously, and links to some of these series in case people want to pick them up and everything. Any closing comments on Spectacular Spider-Man at all before we
go watch Spectacular Spider-Man? Ignore Ultimate Spider-Man. You can skip it.
Did you Ultimate Spider? That's the latest Disney one and everything. Yeah. So you're not a big fan of that one?
No, I was never really a big. Tried watching it. I mean, I think later seasons it got a little bit better. But
I haven't watched much at all, so I'm really totally in the dark about it.
I can't fully recommend it because it was really it was obvious they were tailoring it to real young children with really short attention spans and simple minds. Because it's not a good representation of the character. It's more like Deadpool wearing a Spider-Man skin. Because he's like breaking the fourth wall. He's doing things that Spider-Man normally doesn't do. And it's just not a good representation. And even the new animation they have coming out, I'm not sure how I feel about it yet. Well, I'll wait and see if that one's worth my time.
Yeah. The saving grace for me in that show is that Coulson was part of it, and Clark Gregg even voicing Coulson, because for some reason that character, I just worship the ground he walks on everywhere and anywhere. But yeah, I mean, if he's the only thing in the show, that's
too. And having Stan Lee make cameos as well was a lot of fun. But
yeah, but go check out Spectacular Spider-Man, because that's really where it's at.
Yes, and the 90s.
Perfect.
Go watch those.
And the 90s one, yeah. And Spider-Man is Amazing Friends if you want some fun.
Yeah.
And some hot redhead X-Men action.
Go watch all the old Spider-Man cartoons. Go watch them. Even go to see if you can find Spider-Man Unlimited and watch that weird one. Have some fun.
Oh, nice, yeah. Good stuff. Yeah, cool. Well, so great. So check out Nightwolf's channel, and until next time, I'm sure you'll be back on the channel, but thanks for joining us this time.
Absolutely.
That's all for this video, but do stay tuned. After the release of Spider-Man Homecoming, I'm going to invite Chris Moe from The Big Show with Chris Moe onto the channel, and we're going to discuss Spider-Man's presence in films, from the original Sam Raimi film in 2002 throughout the recent Amazing Spider-Man films, and now into the Marvel Cinematic Universe after we've both seen the Homecoming film. So that'll be a great discussion. We'll have lots to say about that. That will be posted at some point during the weekend or right after the weekend, after we both had a chance to see the film and record. So lots of great stuff to come, and until next time, keep enjoying and digging deeper into the superhero stories you love. Thanks for watching.